This is the sourdough bread that sustained pioneer homesteaders for generations versus the industrial product filling grocery store shelves today. One fed self-sufficient families practicing off-grid living with 4 simple ingredients for days, while the other contains up to 60 different chemicals and might be making millions of people sick. This isn't just about bread, it's about the traditional food preservation skills that built America. For over 6,000 years, from the ancient Fertile Crescent until the late 1800s, sourdough bread was humanity's staff of life and the cornerstone of homestead food security. People made it by hand using only flour, water, salt, and wild Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast cultures. This wasn't just food, it was medicine, sustenance, and survival rolled into one simple loaf that every homesteader needed to master. When pioneer families loaded their wagons and headed west to establish homesteads, they carried a treasure more valuable than gold: their sourdough starter containing living Lactobacillus sanfrancesensis bacteria. This living culture, passed down through generations, would keep their families fed and healthy through brutal winters, endless trails, and the harsh realities of self-sufficient frontier life. But something fundamental changed in our bread around 1961, and the consequences are only now becoming clear for anyone trying to maintain traditional homesteading nutrition. Now, let's explore how pioneer homesteaders actually made this survival bread. Picture a typical evening on the Oregon Trail. The day's journey had ended, camp was pitched, and a big fire crackled in the gathering darkness. The homesteading pioneers would retrieve their precious sourdough crock, a ceramic vessel containing what they called wet yeast that had the consistency of pancake batter. Unlike the dry powders we know today, this living culture was ready for immediate use with no planning required, essential for off-grid living. They'd take out a pan, fill it half with flour, make a well in the center, and pour in their sourdough starter. A pinch of salt, a bit of soda, all mixed according to judgment, honed by necessity and traditional homestead skills. The soft dough was then flattened into a flapjack shape and placed in a hot cast iron skillet covered with a lid that had been heated on the coals. Within an hour, they had fresh bread. When the meat finished cooking, the men would sit around a canvas spread on the ground, dipping their warm bread into the hot fat from the skillet. This simple meal provided the energy and nutrients needed for another day of pushing west into unknown territory to establish new homesteads. Next, let's examine what made this homestead bread so nutritionally superior. What made this bread so special wasn't just the method. It was the slow fermentation driven by wild Saccharomyces cerevisiae yeast and Lactobacillus sanfrancesensis, bacteria working together for days, weeks, sometimes years. This long, slow process broke down anti-nutrients like phytic acid that can bind to essential minerals and prevent their absorption, crucial knowledge for homesteaders with limited food sources. Research from Rothamsted Research shows that sourdough fermentation reduces phytic acid content by up to 90%, while traditional French bread made with commercial yeast only reduces it by 40%. The fermentation also enhanced mineral bioavailability. Iron absorption increased by 10%, zinc by 25%. When you're establishing a homestead with limited food sources, every nutrient counts. The pioneers unknowingly created a superfood through nothing more than time, patience, and the traditional skills passed down through generations. But there's more. That long fermentation process actually pre-digested much of the gluten, making the bread easier on sensitive stomachs, essential for homestead families who couldn't afford digestive issues. The organic acids produced during fermentation gave the bread natural preservative qualities without any chemical additives. Some homesteading pioneers reported their sourdough bread lasting weeks without spoiling, a crucial advantage for self-sufficient living when resupply opportunities were hundreds of miles apart. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this so far. Now let's talk about what changed everything in 1961. The British Baking Industries Research Association introduced something called the Chorleywood bread process, and everything changed for industrial bread production. This revolutionary method could produce a loaf of bread from flour to sliced and packaged form in just 3.5 hours. Compare that to the days or weeks of fermentation that homesteaders used for food preservation. The Chorleywood process uses 2 to 3 times the usual amount of yeast, adds vitamin C, fat, and multiple enzymes, then subjects the dough to intense mechanical mixing at high speeds. The result? A spongy loaf with large air pockets that looks like bread, smells like bread, but has been stripped of the slow biological processes that made traditional homestead bread nutritious. Today, over 80% of all bread in the UK is made using this industrial method, and similar processes dominate worldwide bread production. But speed comes with a cost that modern homesteaders are beginning to understand. Where pioneer homestead bread contained 4 ingredients, modern commercial bread can contain any of 60 different chemicals approved by the FDA. Here's the catch. Manufacturers aren't required to list these chemical additives on the package because they're added to the flour before it reaches the bakery, not during the bread-making process. Let's examine some of these concerning additives. Potassium bromate has been used as a flour improver since 1914, helping dough rise higher and creating that appealing texture. But during baking, it can convert into a carcinogenic substance. Lab studies show it causes tumors in the thyroid, gut lining, and increases kidney cancer risk in animals. The European Union banned it in 1990. Canada followed in 1994. Most of the world has banned this chemical, but it remains legal in most of the United States. Then there's azotocarbonamide E927, nicknamed the yoga mat chemical because it's also used in foam plastics. When this substance breaks down during baking, it forms compounds linked to tumor growth in laboratory mice. The Environmental Working Group lists it on their 2025 Dirty Dozen Guide to Food Chemicals, yet it remains in countless American bread products. California recently became the first state to take action, with Governor Gavin Newsom signing the California Food Safety Act in 2023. Starting in 2027, it will be illegal to sell, distribute, or manufacture food containing potassium bromate and 3 other additives in California. Several other states are now considering similar legislation. But additives are just part of the problem that modern homesteaders face. The wheat itself has changed dramatically. Norman Borlaug, the Nobel Prize-winning wheat breeder working with CIMMYT International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, introduced high-yielding dwarf wheat varieties like Lerma Rojo 64 and Sonora 64 during the Green Revolution of the 60s. While these varieties helped feed the world, they came with unintended consequences for traditional food security. The famous broadbalk wheat experiment at Rothamsted Research, spanning more than a century, documented that when dwarf wheats were introduced in 1968, nutritional value plummeted 18 to 29% in mineral content, including zinc, iron, copper, magnesium, phosphorus, manganese, sulfur, and calcium. We traded nutrition for yield, and homesteaders seeking nutritious food are paying the price. Now let's explore the gluten sensitivity crisis affecting modern homesteaders. Consider this alarming statistic. A decade ago, gluten intolerance levels were at 1 in 2,500 worldwide. Today, they're 1 in 133. That's nearly a 20-fold increase in just 10 years. Many researchers believe the problem isn't gluten itself, but rather the way we process grain and what we spray on it. Enter glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup herbicide manufactured by Monsanto. In the 80s, farmers began using glyphosate as a pre-harvest desiccant on wheat crops. They spray it directly on the wheat about a week before harvest to speed up ripening and drying. Charles Benbrook, a former executive director of the Board on Agriculture at the National Academy of Sciences, notes that pre-harvest desiccation may account for only a small percentage of overall glyphosate use, but it accounts for over 50% of dietary exposure. One anonymous wheat farmer from Saskatchewan admitted, "I think every non-organic farmer in Saskatchewan uses glyphosate on most of their wheat acres every year." According to the National Association of Wheat Growers, about 30% of wheat acres in the U.S. receive glyphosate applications. Routine monitoring found that nearly 30% of food items surveyed contained glyphosate residues. North America uses over 61 million kilograms of this chemical annually. The timing of these applications means glyphosate residues are concentrated in the grain that becomes your daily bread. Some researchers suggest this may explain why people report feeling better on gluten-free diets. They're not avoiding gluten. They're avoiding glyphosate contamination that homesteaders are increasingly concerned about. Meanwhile, companies are beginning to respond to consumer pressure from health-conscious homesteaders. Kellogg has committed to phase out pre-harvest desiccation with glyphosate in their wheat and oat supply chains by the end of 2025. Over 100 brands and 5,000 products are now certified as glyphosate residue-free. But the most telling indicator of what we've lost comes from this experiment that every homesteader should know about. Food researchers placed store-bought commercial bread on kitchen counters for months past their expiration dates. The bread never rotted, no mold appeared. After half a year, it looked exactly the same. As one researcher noted, if it doesn't rot, it's not food. Pioneer Homestead bread would begin showing signs of life, beneficial mold growth, within days if left exposed. That's because it was actually food made with living ingredients that could support other living organisms. The good news for modern homesteaders is that traditional methods are making a comeback. The global sourdough market is projected to reach $3.3 billion by 2029, growing at over 6% annually. In developed countries, consumer awareness of sourdough benefits has been rising dramatically among those pursuing self-sufficient lifestyles. Artisan bakers are returning to time-tested homesteading methods. Paul Barker, a traditional baker, observes, "Modern bread doesn't taste of bread. If it's not allowed to rise and prove naturally, then it doesn't develop the proper taste." The Boudin Bakery in San Francisco has been using the same sourdough starter since the California gold rush of the 1840s. Their bread connects us directly to those pioneer homesteading families who understood that good bread takes time and traditional skills. When you choose real sourdough bread made with traditional homesteading methods, you're getting the same benefits that kept pioneer families strong: enhanced mineral absorption, reduced anti-nutrients, improved digestibility, and natural preservation without chemicals, all essential elements of food security and self-sufficiency. The fermentation process also provides better blood sugar control, with sourdough showing a significantly lower glycemic index than commercial bread. The slow release of sugars helps prevent the spikes and crashes that contribute to diabetes and metabolic dysfunction, crucial for maintaining health in off-grid living situations. The contrast couldn't be starker for anyone pursuing traditional homesteading skills. Pioneer families thrived on bread made with 4 ingredients and days of fermentation using methods every homesteader should master. They had strong bones, stable energy, and the endurance to build a nation from scratch through self-sufficient living. Today, we struggle with rising obesity, diabetes, digestive disorders, and food sensitivities while eating bread that contains dozens of chemicals and takes hours instead of days to produce. The pioneers didn't have nutritional science, but they had something more valuable: generations of accumulated wisdom about what truly nourishes the human body through traditional homesteading practices. They understood that good things take time, that living food supports living people, and that shortcuts in nutrition usually come with hidden costs, lessons every modern homesteader should embrace. As we face a future of increasing food sensitivities and declining nutritional quality in our food supply, maybe it's time for homesteaders to look backward for answers. The sourdough starter sitting in your refrigerator might just be the key to reclaiming the food security and vitality that built the frontier, one slow fermented loaf at a time using traditional homesteading skills. The choice is simple for anyone pursuing self-sufficient living. We can continue eating industrial bread products designed for shelf life and profit margins, or we can return to the traditional food preservation methods that sustained human civilization for thousands of years. Our homesteading ancestors knew something we're only now rediscovering: that the staff of life should actually support life, not just fill our stomachs. The pioneer homesteaders had it right all along. It's time we listened to their wisdom and reclaimed these essential traditional skills for modern self-sufficient living. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and comment below your thoughts. I'd love to hear them.